Lots of beefs in the news cycle recently.
This time, former FCC chairs are blasting President Donald Trump's pick, Brendan Carr.
Carr, however, appears to be making fun of the whole thing.
Let's start with former President Barack Obama's FCC head, Tom Wheeler. He told Darcy he was hesitant to criticize a successor, but still did anyway. Wheeler took issue with Carr's investigation into Comcast for their DEI initiatives. He said, "The fact that they're saying that because you have a corporate philosophy of inclusion, I will launch an investigation that attacks the fact that your website states this is a core value of our business. Maybe that was my breaking point." Former President Bill Clinton's FCC chair, Reese Hunt, also weighed in, saying that the point of the FCC was to be independent and protect the First Amendment. He said, "So it's very important that all the commissioners remember this piece of originalism and they adhere to it, because if we lose the First Amendment, we've lost everything in this country." Lastly, former President George Bush's chair, Alfred Sykes, emphasized that the First Amendment should be foundational in both the Constitution and the way the FCC acts.
When Darcy reached out to Carr for a response, he wrote, "Lol, just 3. He then sent Darcy a super long statement, which reads in part, "I do feel bad for the 3 of them, though. I got to imagine it's hard when the curtain is closing on your career, and yet you're still yearning for one more moment in the limelight." Then Carr said he wasn't surprised that they disagree with the Trump administration's agenda. 2 of them were President Obama's and President Clinton's FCC chairs, and while I'm not a doctor, all 3 of them appear to have pretty bad cases of TDS. That's Trump derangement syndrome. Carr called all 3 of them partisans and said he would give everyone a fair shake at the FCC.
On top of Comcast, Carr is investigating PBS and NPR over to see if they violated any rules by airing paid ads. Carr has also restored Trump's bias complaints against ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Well, look, Brendan Carr has described himself as a free speech warrior. He has objected to the bullying of private media companies by government. I like all that. I'm not sure why. Who's being investigated? PBS? Is that
NPR.
Yeah, I mean, those are media companies that get significant funding from the government. So there is some right for the public to have accountability there. I don't think the government should, as a general rule, be investigating private media companies, but I would also just cut off the funding to NPR and PBS, and then they can do whatever they want. Then they can DEI themselves until their heart's content. None of my business. Don't care. But as long as they're on the government grain dole, then it might be a valid exercise.
I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that I like PBS and I like NPR, and I think they provide
I like lots of things that I don't
service.
think the government needs to pay for.
Well, that's probably true, but they also do a lot of independent fundraising on their own. I'm sure you've heard.
Viewers like you.
Exactly, viewers like you. I mean, look, I think what's notable here is that you have a bipartisan group of past FCC chairs, whatever Carr said to the contrary, who are raising concerns. And I do think it's generally outside the norm. It's outside of, conventional protocol to go back after you've already been in office to point fingers and criticize people who've come after you. So I think that's worth calling out for sure.
I mean, if it's wrong look, I agree that it's wrong to go after or hound private individuals and private media companies. Of course, this has been standard Democratic policy. I've pointed out this example now several times in recent days on Rising, but Democratic lawmakers have hounded Comcast and Verizon and other cable providers, other platforms, YouTube, et cetera, for platforming conservative news channels, news content. They have sent intimidating letters threatening to investigate them for doing so. So this is very standard operating procedure. So it's a little, if the criticism is that, oh, how dare the FCC, treat companies like this? Well, this is exactly how progressive liberal governance works. I object to it, but it's just the same thing.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that whole discussion about the apparatus. And Democrats clearly feel like they are at a significant disadvantage when it comes to the conservative media infrastructure and apparatus. And I don't know all those members of Congress, but apparently they're lobbing their bombs in a very particular way.
I mean, Dems are losing the media ecosystem. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. It's just a very right-coded media environment all of a sudden. I don't think liberals have learned how to excel. They used to excel just fine, but they are really struggling to make political content, political news content, political opinion content that resonates with young people on the modes of communication that are now so much more common, like our show, YouTube,
Very
and TikTok and those kinds of things, right-leaning content creators, right-leaning podcasts. It's not always heavily political content, but it evinces a right-of-center or a pro-Trump ethos that has been really successful, and Democrats have not come up with any response to. Well, we keep hearing, we got to have our own Joe Rogan. Well, you had your own Joe Rogan. His name was Joe Rogan. He was a progressive Bernie Sanders supporter, and now him and so many other people who were successful in that environment have drifted to the right or far to the right in a very pro-Trump direction. It's fascinating.
I think that this is another area where Donald Trump should be given some credit. In the same way that he has reshaped the Republican Party, he's also reshaped the conservative media landscape, because it is about falling in line. And by the way, think what you will about him, but he makes for great entertainment. He makes for great content. So of course people are picking it up and running with it. I think that is fascinating. You don't have a similar dynamic on the left. I mean, I would say during Barack Obama's heyday, of course, Twitter came into being, and he was a very cool president. So you had people creating content that was related to him as an individual, and you just don't have that these days.
Up next, comedian Bill Maher has something to say about Trump's government slashing. We'll watch.